Hi everyone, it's Dr. Wiebrecht here. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to do something a little different and see if this potentially worked, so bear with me as I try some new technology here. I wanted to show you guys a few slides of the slideshow. I know pictures help greatly in sort of creating a much easier visual image for some of you guys as you guys are learning. So we had talked about deviance and social control, one of which is really important for us to look at some things as far as, what violations of rules and norms are occurring and why is that important from us from a sociological perspective to find that out. And I think we had talked about in my last presentation that deviance is completely relative to the person in which is defining it. We know that deviance is based on that adherence to certain violations of norms. And so this is really important as we begin to look at that stuff. We had begun to talk a little bit about explanations of deviance, the sociobiology piece, the psychology and the sociology piece of it. We know that each one of those has different perspectives on why people might violate certain norms, and biological explanations focus on genetic predispositions. So this is really important for us. I wanted to give you guys some visuals as far as certain images. We see this image of this gentleman who's showering outside. You can see the picture of the little girls. They're sort of giggling because, it's sort of funny, but if you saw this, if somebody were showering outside in a public place, maybe at a football game or something, would we think that that's deviant in that eyes? In this particular culture, in this particular neighborhood, in India, this isn't something out of the norm. And so while they smile, they don't necessarily bat an eye at the infraction. So I also want to talk about symbolic interactionists, and I think that's important for us to begin to dissect this a little bit more. We begin to interpret deviance through the following theories, and we're going to sort of highlight each one of these. The first one is differential association theory, where people learn deviance from the groups whom they associate with. Control theory is people generally avoid deviance because of an effective system that's in place, both inner and outer controls, which we'll talk about. And of course, that last one is the labeling theory. Here, people are directed toward or away from deviance by the labels others pin on them. Okay, so again, all good information. We're going to begin to dissect this a little bit more in detail. Now, understand that symbolic interactionists really view this in a very interesting lens. Let's take the first theory, that differential association theory. This was created by Edward Sutherland to sort of indicate that those who associate with particular groups, right, tend to orient themselves toward deviant activities. Maybe they learn an excess of definitions, in a sense, of deviance, and are more likely to participate in certain type of activities. Think about that. The key to differential association here is the learning of ideas and attitudes that begin to follow when somebody breaks the law, or if somebody's teaching certain members to violate those norms. So think about families that maybe are involved in crime. They might set their children up on a law-breaking path. Some friends, maybe some neighborhoods, tend to encourage certain types of deviant behaviors when we think about it. Even subcultures at times can contain particular attitudes about deviance and conformity that are learned by other members that are participating in that. Let me show you guys an image of the Russian Godfather. He's leaving a Moscow court after he was acquitted of double murder. So when we look at a family that's maybe involved in the mafia, right, we got to begin to question, how does this play a role in it? Symbolic interactionists stress that people aren't nearly just mere pawns in this. There is certain individuals that help produce that orientation to life sometimes. And so their choice of association a lot of times sort of helps set that pace. If you have a family that doesn't bat an eye, if maybe they go to jail for murder, that's important when we look at how that's going to orient that particular family, that particular group, and how they view deviance. When we look at a family like the mafia, right, again, they have a very different view as to what's right and wrong. So if somebody were to do their family wrong and then their doing some type of revenge in that act, in their perspective, they might not view it as bad. And so that's important for us to look at. There are certain things that I think that we should also sort of keep in mind here, one of which is the control theory. So I'm going to flip back up here. So the control theory is where everyone's sort of propelled toward deviance. There's a system in place that works against these motivations sometimes to deviance. Walter Reckless described two types of systems. There's something called an inner control and an outer control. Pretty basic understanding of it. Think about the inner controls as having that capacity to withstand certain temptations toward deviance, and internalized morality, integrity, fear of punishment, and maybe even that ultimate desire to be good in a sense, right? There's something internally motivating you to avoid breaking the law or to do something that's wrong in a sense. That outer control, on the other hand, are those people, those particular groups, your family, your friends, maybe it's the police, whoever it is that might be influencing us not to deviate. There is a gentleman named Travis Hershey. He noted that there are very strong bonds that exist within our society, which makes sense, right? We have certain attachments, certain commitments, maybe involvements, maybe even beliefs in a sense, right? That guide people to have more effective inner controls. So let's talk about the labeling theory. The labeling theory is this view that labels people are sort of given to certain individuals, right? We know that those labels are so powerful in that because they have their own effect and perceptions on them. It sometimes can channel behavior that can lead people to either deviance or conformity in a sense, okay? So Gresham Sykes and David Matza use the term techniques of neutralization, right? So what does that mean? They believe that they're strategies that deviants use to resist certain types of society's labels, right? These might be, I was looking to see if I had put a slide in there. That's okay. They might be as simple as a denial of responsibility. I didn't do it, right? The second might be the denial of injury. Who really got hurt in this, right? I did it, but who really got hurt in the whole scheme of things? The third one might be the denial of a victim. She deserved it. She did me wrong. I ended up, she deserved what she got. The fourth would be condemnation of the condemners. So who are you to talk to? Who are you to talk, right? You've done this. It's like calling the kettle black, right? And the fifth is an appeal to higher loyalty. I had to help my friends. They're not going to do me wrong. Think about the mafia here again, right? We look back at that picture of the Russian Godfather, right? That's important because that appeal to a higher loyalty, family might be the utmost important thing within that particular subculture. So when you begin to look at it, you can say, they are trying to justify it in those means. Sometimes an individual's deviant act can just begin casually, right? Maybe they gradually move into much more serious deviance offenses. And sometimes an individual's deviant labels can be something in which they revel in. So let me pause there. Let me show you a couple things here. This one is sort of an interesting picture here. This is a gentleman in which he was labeled. There are judges that occur across the country that actually do shaming. And we see shaming all the time on the internet, right? If your dog was really bad while you were gone and you put a picture of them, look what I did today, right? And then you take a picture of them and post that, that's shaming in a sense, right? So here this is something that has become quite popular. With the shaming world of it, we can begin to see that judges are actually using this to try to shame people into understanding that these are bad actions that they are performing in. So this 19-year-old was given, instead of a full jail sentence, they received a lesser offense. And as a result, they had to just hold a sign outside of their former workplace that stated that they were a thief. in the sense that they are attempting to shame themselves so that other people know this and create this label in a sense. So I will talk to you about a little bit of these thoughts with it. I'll probably post a discussion so you guys can offer some commentary on that. But I think that's really important. And we also know that stereotypes are important, right? Think about this. We know that there are some people that enjoy being deviant, right? They revel in that particular identity. This could be a motorcycle gang. This could be, people that laugh sort of at the face of death, that type of stuff. There is a gentleman named William J. Chambliss. He did a study on the Saints, which were a troubled group of boys from a respectable middle class, actually. And then there was also the group of the Roughnecks, who were boys from a working class family who hung out on the streets. So they provide a really good dichotomy of the labeling theory, right? How do these labels that are given to certain people affect how other people perceive them? And do they channel that particular behavior into deviance or conformity? So that particular study that was done showed how those labels open and close doors of opportunity for individuals that are involved in this type of thing. This particular slide, I do want to pinpoint, we look at these stereotypes, both positive and negative. And a lot of times we have certain perceptions and reactions that begin to occur. When you see this image, what sort of comes to your mind? Where do you think this person is? What do you think this person did? So I think that's important for us to remember and sort of pull this back to that concept of stereotypes that we had talked about before, and how powerful those stereotypes are when we look at labeling people and how that can affect somebody. So if you've always been labeled as maybe the bad kid, that nobody's ever said, boy, you make really good choices, or, that you're really trying. How does that affect a child when you think about it? Does that push them more toward deviant behaviors because they're like, well, I have this label. Why am I going to try to change? So this is really important as we begin to piece these theories through, and more specifically through the symbolic interactionist side of it, because we're looking at those labels, we're looking at those interactions that people have as to why people might behave the way they do. So remember those inner and outer controls. Remember that, we're trying to understand why certain people might associate with particular groups. And so we really want us to look at that a little bit more in detail.